Hello and welcome to the Creative Academy. This is our happy hour. We are getting started here on Wednesday, which is March the 13th. I don't know how that happened, but it did. Actually, I think it's the 14th. No, it's the 13th.
13th. Tomorrow is Pi Day.
Yes, I'm losing track of it. Yeah, tomorrow is Pi Day and Friday is my birthday. Dun, dun, dun. So just
Woohoo!
yeah, except I'm turning 50, so there's less woo-hoo and more like woo.
Life starts at 50, you puppy.
Yeah, I will give that a go. Well, I'm very glad to see Marie here. So Marie has a query slash synopsis that she is doing. Happy birthday to you too, Marie. Now, did you want to tell us a little bit about where you are sending this off to or what's afoot for you?
Sure. There's, I don't know if you know, but there's Harlequin. They have a call out right now for like a funding thing. So I thought, well, that's a good deadline for me. So I'm just basically using it as a deadline to get this done because I think it's probably not ready. Also, it's, well, I might be able to get it ready. You know what I mean? But just using a deadline basically, and I work better to deadlines. So.
Don't we all? I love a good deadline.
It's called a feel good fun. It's just called feel good. I don't know, and it's like to fund, but they're mostly, I think, novels are in there, but they're mostly looking for TV and film scripts.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I am going to walk us through what I have for Marie and give her some feedback so she has that, because I also know she has a dentist appointment this morning. Yes. So we're doing all the fun for her. We're doing queries and dentists. So those are everybody's favorite things. So I'm going to share my screen so you guys can see what I am looking at here. And don't worry, Marie, I will send this back to you at the end of today, so you will have it as well. So the first thing I want to highlight is it's not a traditional query where it's sort of like, dear agent, I'm submitting like what she's sort of starting off with. And I'm guessing that's because of the nature of this particular call out that they have, that they want to start with just a summary to begin with. So her summary is: a strumpet, a knight, a stable boy, and a prince find themselves and each other on the road to Ludlow's Christmas fair. But nothing is what it seems in this medieval fantasy romance. The strumpet is really a widow, stolen by the evil baron who sacked her castle and killed her husband. The stable boy is really her daughter. The knight is really a Welsh soldier, I can't even say it, a Welsh soldier, from his former lord's in his former lord's clothing, and the prince, well, he might have been one if his father hadn't been a traitor to the last true Prince of Wales. A little second sight and a lot of sleight of hand provide the magic as the Queen of England, or is she, brings King Edward's new laws to bear on the Baron. The Robin of Sherwood meets the Knight's Tale in this lively tramp across the English countryside. So before I jump into some things, I'm curious, does anyone else have any thoughts? I think it's a fun and intriguing premise. I think one of the things you'll see that I highlighted, you had the words lively tramp. Like I just thought that was a really good word choice because I think it gives us a lot of this feel in the tone. Other people want to weigh in at all? You're all going to be quiet. Okay, so other things. So I did...
Sounds like a fun book, and I'd be really, like, just reading that, I'd be really interesting to see how all those characters get juggled. So, I mean, I think it does the most important thing, which intrigues us. And there's a lot of, you had mentioned this was Harlequin, so there's a lot of what I consider sort of romance tropes, which is good because that's what Harlequin's business is based on, right? So there's a lot of tropes going in here. So just a few things, and I'm being as nitpicky as possible because I'm assuming that's what you want, Marie. Is you talk about nothing is what it seems in this medieval fantasy romance. And I didn't have a lot of sense of fantasy other than there is the line, a little second sight. So that was the only thing where I wasn't sure how much fantasy was in there. I guess when I think fantasy, I'm thinking full on dragons. Bonnie knows how I love me some dragons. So I was expecting there to possibly be a lot more magic than I picked up from in the actual synopsis. So that is something for you to keep in mind. So this is just the short summary.
So it's irrelevant here, but later for you to be aware, even when I read the synopsis, I didn't have a sense that there was a lot of magic or fantasy type elements going on in here.
Is it okay for me to answer, or?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. I mean, you know, sometimes you're supposed to just be quiet when these things are going on. But yeah, I think you're right there. And like, so I wonder, it is just second sight. That's the only fantasy element. If you know,
I might take fantasy out then, just because I think for me it sets up expectations that there's going to be a lot more. And of course, at that time, medieval time period, second sight wasn't considered necessarily all that unusual. Like, this is a time, medieval times, there were witches and all these kinds of things. So I don't, again, for me, when I think fantasy, I'm thinking, you know, there's going to be some alchemy going on. There's going to be some dragons flying by, some fairies that show up.
Yeah, well, no.
No.
At this point anyway, but yeah, so.
Yeah. And that, you know, holds up in terms of when I read the synopsis, there wasn't a sense, again, like a real fantasy. So I would be tempted to take it out there. The strumpet is really a widow, and you have the line here, stolen by the evil baron. And that was one where I wondered if it should be kidnapped.
Yeah.
Just because stolen made me think almost like she was more of a, what's the word I'm looking for? Object, right? So giving her a little bit more agency. Like if she's kidnapped, that feels different. Like stolen, I think of objects, not people.
This is true. I just read this book called Stolen Women, which is all about these women who got kidnapped, right? So yeah, you're right. Kidnapped is better.
So that was just for me. So then we're going to launch into the synopsis. And I know those of you there won't be able to read fast enough, but basically the synopsis, I think you start off really strong, like a whisper in the darkness. Terwyn, and I'm going to butcher these Welsh names just so you know that, Marie, just so we're clear on the get-go. I was never good with Welsh. Terwyn, it's her mother, Ariana, bringing Terwyn a new plan for their escape at the Ludlow Christmas Fair. Ariana is the forced mistress of the Lord Castle, who sacked their Welsh castle and killed her husband. Terwyn is hiding in the Bristol town as the half-wit stable boy. I just flagged half-wit. It doesn't bother me at all, but I do know with things being a lot more politically correct, I didn't know if somebody might have a challenge with the term half-wit. That's what they would have called him at the time, right? Like, so that's where it fits with the time period, but I wanted to flag it again. With
good.
that. The only other thing is I wasn't sure how long ago the castle had been sacked and she was now planning this escape. Was this 5 years ago? Was this 6 months ago? Was this last week? That kind of thing.
Around about 6 months.
Yeah. So that was, and I think part of what flagged me is now Ariana is pregnant. So I didn't know if she's pregnant by her husband or by...
Oh.
Right. So if it was 5 years, and what made me think it was longer ago is the next line. And Terwyn is getting too old to hide anymore, which made me think like, oh, when we first got here, she was 8 and now she's 13 and, you know, developing breasts and all that stuff. So hiding her as a stable boy isn't going to work any longer.
Right. Okay.
So that's just something I would clarify there a little bit.
Yeah. Good.
All right, so then we have Sir Gareth Townsend, who shows up. He's employed by the Lord Bristol. And Lord Bristol, not a nice guy, in addition to kidnapping Ariana and so forth. He's sort of torturing someone here, and he's basically, he's just not a nice guy, our Lord Bristol. Let's just summarize it that way. And he's now hiring Gareth. And one thing to flag here is Gareth's reputation as the Butcher of Gwyn and the recent massacre of Welsh farmers has preceded him. That made me think he was not a nice guy.
Mm-hmm.
And later, I sense that he really is. Because we have the next, a little bit further down, realizing he can't help the knight, Gareth decides to use his battlefield experience to aid the wounded bard and slips away to find the man. So I was like, well, if he's a butcher, does he really care?
That's
so
it. So what I'm trying to do there is indicate that he's in wolf's clothing, so to speak. He's basically killed his lord and taken on that persona.
Oh, I missed that part.
Yeah.
So just something that would make that a little bit Gareth's false reputation as the Butcher of Gwyn.
Yeah, something. Okay.
Just something, so, because like when I first read that, and partly that term, which I think is really strong, which is butcher. Like when I hear that, I'm like, this dude is no good and can't be trusted. And he actually, basically, I think, becomes the love interest.
Yeah, that's the root of his conflict all the way through, is that he has taken on this persona and that it has this reputation, and to stay alive, he kind of has to play that, you know?
Yeah. So his false reputation, or his chosen persona of the Butcher of Gwyn, something like that we know he's not actually a horrible person. So then we have the Welsh rebel, Mad Dog. I always want to say and call him Mad Dog, but I'm not sure that.
Yeah.
Mad Dog. So he's sort of, doing this scouting and so forth, and he actually has a vision about a young woman in trouble, and then he sees that it's maybe connected to the figure that he sees running away from town. So I just wondered if there was another line of motivation there, because he decides to follow her and warn her of the dangers first. Like even a small thing like the vision is so strong, he decides to follow her and warn her of the dangers. Because otherwise it was that thing of, he's got a really big goal. He wants to regain his ancestral lands. So he's got his big thing, but then he puts that aside to first talk to this girl.
Mm-hmm. Great.
So I would make a line about like the vision is so strong or so compelling, he decides to follow. So then we go back to Gareth. He's headed off to Bristol with his new horse till he meets his new charge. Ariana's beauty and marks her as different from the common horse he's associated with a soldier. So I guess my question was, would he be in charge of a horse? Or does he know that she's the mistress of, what's his name? The bad dude. Lord Bristol.
Yeah, he knows he's got to guard this woman so she doesn't run away, basically. Like he knows that he's supposed to be in charge of her.
Yeah. Like, would he know?
She's certainly not a wife.
Yeah, I didn't know if I would call her a common whore.
Right. Okay.
And because for me, originally I wondered here for a second, like, oh, is she pretending to be a whore to get away?
No.
Right. So, and I didn't know if people would know that she used to be a fancy mistress who had a castle and things like that.
Yeah, she was a lady. She is a noblewoman. Yeah, she happens to be, it's like she's Welsh, right? So in that time period, she was, black, sort of.
Yeah, like it would have been like, huh? So yeah, I just didn't know if he would call her, like, I think, and also, common horse, he's associated with his soldier. Like this at the end of the day is still Lord Bristol's mistress.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there would be, like, how he would talk about her is a little bit different.
Okay.
So then Taryn wakes up at the forest, and she's, basically gets to meet Mad Dog, as I like to call him, because there's no way I'm pronouncing these names. No way. And there's some sparks. There's a little bit of romance between them. I really do like that she gets her romance story, as does Ariana. Like, I really did like that they both have a little bit of that. My only question was here, she's been hiding as a stable boy. So I didn't know initially, was he attracted to her thinking she was a boy?
Oh, well. Perfectly acceptable there.
I'm fine with anything. Like, love is love as far as I'm concerned. But I just wasn't, like, I quite like that. Again, there's all these sort of, which again is just so lovely with romance. He has no idea that they were handfasted as kids, that they were supposed to get married. So he doesn't know that. But I think it needs to be clear that he knows she's a girl.
Yeah, he knows she's a girl at this point.
Yeah. Because it says, he has another vision about the danger she's in, but he doesn't appear to have recognized her. So I'm like, okay, so he knows she's not a boy.
Right. Okay.
So then off they go to the Bristol market. And then I'm assuming that your synopsis continues here at the end, that you just ran out of. Yeah. Which is totally fine. I just wanted to make sure you weren't ending your synopsis with a ... Because I was like, no, you have to tell us how it ends. So as long as you have that, I'm happy with that. But I think the story itself sounds really fun. The premise is fun. The synopsis for me is making sense. Just those were the areas of clarification.
That's really good, Eileen. Thank you so much. That's going to really help. That's exactly what I wanted. So thank you.
Well, I love when that happens. Anyone else want to weigh in or have any thoughts on the synopsis or the story at all that you can bring to light?
I could say a few words. It's usually not my kind of story, but I happen to be watching on Netflix Merlin, and it's that kind of story, and I really, really am enjoying it, Marie. So I think we do well with it. And I think, I love all the suggestions that Eileen brought out. I think what I would suggest. The only thing that sort of stands out to me is in your summary when you start it, and it sort of sounds like the start of a joke, like a rabbi, a priest, and a
that's what I'm working with.
I'll get the bar. And so there's a part of me that likes that, but there's a part of me that doesn't like it. It stops me, I guess, is what I'm saying. And the line that I actually really like, and I know back in my screenwriting days, they used to always suggest that you lead with, what does this relate to that we silly producers, directors can understand? And the fact that you've said it's a blend of Knight's Tale and whatever. So I'm wondering, maybe lead just with that line and then go into the rabbi, the priest, and the
Okay. Yeah.
Just a thought. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think is a really good point, because we talked about and I lose track of when I talk about things, but we talked about the elevator pitch, I think yesterday. And one of the things we talked about was setting up tone and feel. So for me, when you start with a line, or you even have a line that has a strumpet, a knight, a stable boy, all are on this thing, I'm anticipating that this is going to be light, frothy, fun. There's going to be some humor in here. And it's almost that Shakespearean Midsummer Night's Dream, where there's all these sort of mistaken identities and all those kinds of things. So if that's not the feel, like if this is a dark book, where there's all sorts of horrible things happening, then I wouldn't have that line, because it sets up for me that idea. Christy says it almost sounds like a joke, but yeah, like it has like right off the bat to me, that's like, okay, then this is the tone of this book. It's going to be fun. These mistaken identities are going to lead to sort of certain hijinks that will come out of that. And it's going to be that fun romance, right? Like it's that.
Hopefully.
Yeah. So as long as that's what you're going for. But if you were like, I want to write, a very serious historical novel about this woman and all these, then I would not open with that line. I think that's a really good reminder of always think about the tone and feel that you want to have in something.
Yeah.
The closest movie I can come up to that I expected from that opening is not to this extreme, but sort of a Robin Hood Men in Tights kind of little bit of farce going on.
Yeah, like Robin of Sherwood is kind of like that. Yeah, it's not as extreme though as Men in Tights.
Yeah, Men in Tights is just, if you haven't seen that, that's funny. That's my film recommendation. Oh, the day.
But I do feel like I haven't read, like I love Arthurian legends, and I went through a long period of time where like I read everything that was on the market at that point in time that was Arthurian. And your pitch makes me go, oh, I haven't read anything like that for a really long time. And I'm really looking forward to going back into that sort of world.
Cool. Yeah, it's a fun world. I think you have just a really fun story and a lot of thing with romance. If they are looking to make films, the only hesitation that I will give you, and I wouldn't stop me from writing it at all, is this would be expensive to make. Anytime you're doing a period piece, you have to do costumes and the settings and all that kind of, so it's going to make something much more expensive. I'd gone a few rounds with Harlequin with one of my romantic comedies. And one of the reasons that I think we stay, although they never did make it, so apparently don't listen to their advice all the way, is one of the reasons that they liked it was the production values could be lower. There weren't a lot of large crowd scenes. There weren't a lot of scenes that would happen in public where you'd have to be closing off streets and things like that. A lot of it was happening within people's houses or workplaces, which is cheaper production value. Whenever you have, you know, any kind of battle scene or crowd scenes or something that's going to require special effects, it just is going to be more expensive to make, which doesn't mean they don't make it. Obviously they do. There's 6 million Marvel movies out there, but they are much more reluctant to take on something that's going to require that kind of thing. So that just may be something to keep in the back of your hat if they are thinking more something they want to make into a TV or a movie.
I would put this forward just as a novel. At this
Yeah,
point.
I think it would be such a fun book. I would definitely, again, it's not my, probably actually very similar to Jenny. I don't read it all the time, but every so often I go through a kick where I just want to read a whole bunch of stuff kind of set in that time period. And then I burn out and then I'm like, I'm done with Knights. And then I move on to more murder. And then, you know, I come back again.
Cool.
Any questions, Marie? Anything else we can help you with
This
with
is
that?
really great. Thanks, you guys. I'm going to do all that. I'm going to get it all done today because the deadline is the 15th. So.
Yeah, no pressure. There you go.
But I just thought if I hit it with at least the synopsis, it's just the synopsis in chapter 1 that you submit, and that's it. Doesn't even say a cover letter, although I can't, well, you could do it without one. But so
I think it's a super fun premise. So I give it a big thumbs up. And I think there's a few places to just add some clarification that will do it. And you're getting thumbs up from everyone, just in case you don't have your video on. And I would remind everybody that if you ever do want us to take a look at some pages in more detail, we can do that. Like, I think one of the fun things to use this time period for is to have these kinds of discussions and get feedback from other people, because I'll have an opinion, but someone else is going to have a different opinion.
Yeah.
We're going to be recording some blue pencils and so forth later today. And one of the pieces is someone's piece that I have read their entire book as part of the SFU program. So for me, it's very weird to read her synopsis because I'm not sure that I'm seeing it with the same eyes as Donna and Crystal will, who have not read any pages from this book. So I'll be keeping my mouth shut in a lot of that session, because I think the temptation is always to fill in with what you know, when, of course, the agent and editor don't know anything. So it is useful to do that. All right, Marie, so you can duck out whenever you have to for your dentist appointment, but I'm glad we were able to give you that feedback.
Yeah, thanks so much. This is really great. Thank you.
So I also got a question, which I will answer. People are like, why will there be no more Tuesday night office hours? And that it will be kind of on an as needed kind of basis. But initially we thought, office hours will be like, I'll just show up and people will have a question and we'll just troubleshoot through that question. And of course, what you guys tend to do is be like, no, we have no questions. Teach us something, Eileen. And then I have to have something actually prepared. So it meant preparing 2 lectures every week so that I would actually have something ready to go. You guys are killing me. So I'm not going to be doing that anymore. So what we will be doing is the 1 office hour, which will be at this point Wednesday mornings. And then Tuesdays will be anytime we have a special topic. So Donna, for example, has been doing the medium topic. If people are having more questions, so if someone submits and like, I really want a lot of information on insert topic, whatever it is, then we will take it on and we'll add an extra session in. But it's just so that I'm not trying to think of what you guys might find interesting and have no absolutely necessarily any idea of what that might be. And then just sort of wandering around and talking to myself. But having said that, I do have something to talk about today. Lucky souls. I want to talk about the role of luck. And I think the role of luck is fairly important in this business. I know I have shared it before, but when I was sort of publishing my first book, I got the advice from somebody that writing is a craft, but publishing is a casino. And I quite liked that terminology because there are ways that you can, just as if you're in a casino, you can play smart. particularly with certain games. You can sort of know how, for example, if you know how blackjack works, if you have a 20, you don't necessarily want to say hit me because the odds of you losing are high. Conversely, if you have, two twos, you probably do want to say hit me because your odds of winning are higher. So I think publishing is a little bit like that, where if you understand the game, you can make some smart choices within that. But to some degree, there is still going to be an element of luck. And as they say, the house always wins. So there is an element of that as well to just sort of think about. But luck in general, I think, is interesting to talk about. So I'm just curious, show of hands, how many people think that they are lucky? Anyone think they are unlucky? Well, we don't have any unlucky folks out there, or at least no one who's fessing up to being unlucky. So, that's something to think about. So the reason it's going to be is, let's talk about luck. So I want you to imagine for a moment that you have a really huge, important meeting coming up, and you have to be at work on time, like the boss is coming in from the central office, and for love or money, you cannot find your keys. So you are desperately searching for your keys, and with every minute that you're searching for your keys, you know that you're going to be later and later. Does everyone agree that that's unlucky? What if you then get in your car and you find out that actually there was a huge accident, multi-car accident on the bridge, and if you had left on time, you would have been in this horrible, horrific accident. So now are you, in fact, lucky that you couldn't find your keys? So luck is, to some degree, a perspective of how you view it. And yes, Vanessa, I am psychic, and I can see if you have lost your keys. This camera's on all the time. I'm watching you people. So one of the things is, there's just been some interesting studies done about luck, and I think it's interesting to think about. So some studies have found that if you think success is outside of your control, that is, it's just luck, that's all it is, it's random chance, you are less inclined to try as hard. And that comes down to, well, basically, what's the point? Like, it's not really up to me. It's a rigged system. It either works in your favor or it doesn't. There's really nothing that I can do. And the actual term for this, if you go around psychology, they call it learned helplessness. And so it becomes a cycle. So you think, I'm not lucky, therefore there's no point in me, making an effort in that area. Therefore, you don't have as much success in that area, and that reinforces your belief that, yep, I'm in fact, it all came down to luck. So it does become a reinforcing thing. And you see this, and they've done the studies in terms of all sorts of issues. One of the more interesting things, and probably I'm noticing it as someone who's now going to start dating in my 50s, is they talk to people about whether or not someone thought you would ever find love. And so people who said, oh yeah, I 100% believe, there's somebody out there for me, it's just a matter of finding that person, would, continue to engage in activities, do things, and then were more likely after a period of times to find themselves in a relationship that they described as healthy and fulfilling. People who said, oh, no one dates a woman after 50, no one's ever interested in dating, it's just a, random chance if you ever meet someone, were significantly higher to not find themselves in a relationship after a period of time. So we do know that there is something to sort of how we view things. One of the studies that I have talked about before, because I just find it fascinating, was a study that was done at a university where they called people in and they had asked them to define themselves if they felt that they were lucky or unlucky. And then they got to the thing, and it was like, okay, we're going to be doing a test to look at certain stuff, these various psychological things and how you see yourself, but we're running a little bit behind. So if you can just wait here in this waiting room, we'll call you in. And they left a newspaper out for people to look through. So if you looked through the newspaper, there was a very large ad in one of the center pages. And when I say large, I mean it was a significant sized ad in a larger than 12 size font that said, if you see this ad, mention it to the psychologist and you'll get an extra $100. The people who described themselves as lucky saw it significantly more often. They saw it about 70 to 80% of the time. People who saw themselves as, who defined themselves as unlucky, reported it something like less than 20% of the time that they saw it. So before you ask, like, the ad was the same size, it was the exact same paper. So how does that happen? So the question is, like, are the people right? They are just lucky? Well, no, because they're looking at the same paper. It's the same, like it's not like we randomly put out different papers. The idea was that people who define themselves as lucky are potentially thinking of opportunities all the time, and they're expecting good things to happen because I'm lucky. So they're seeing and seizing those opportunities in a way that people who define themselves as unlucky may not. So before I get any further with this, and I'm going to talk about the role of luck and all those kinds of things, is yes, there is an element of luck in publishing, and we will talk about that a little bit more. So I'm not trying to say that it all comes down to your attitude and that's all the kind of thing it is. But it is a case of sort of thinking how you view yourself and whether or not, and we've talked about positive affirmations and having those kinds of things. Like if you sort of have this saying like, I'm not published yet, versus, I've been trying and that's never happened for me, it's probably never going to happen for me, whether or not you're catching and seeing those opportunities. That's one of the reasons why here at the Academy, we're always trying to post like, oh, hey, there's a contest here, or, there's this opportunity. Reese Witherspoon's website has this, because there are all these opportunities all the time. And to quote our famous Wayne Gretzky, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So sort of having that idea, and it's almost that idea of, well, I didn't win this thing, or I didn't get this thing, but there must be some reason for that. So I'm just going to keep going on and keep trying in another way, versus saying, oh, that this is a sign that I am somehow unlucky. So there's a professor, Richard Wiseman, he's out of, I think, the University of Oregon. I've actually met him at a conference before. He did a lot of studies looking again at people who see themselves as lucky, having higher rates of success in relationships, work, fitness, all these different areas. So he sort of defined what are principles of luck, because it's his premise that people can redefine themselves as lucky. So he sort of looked at like, what are the principles of luck? What do they come out to? So the first is acting on opportunities. And that's a really good match with that newspaper example that I was giving earlier, is that lucky people are more likely to create, notice, and act upon chance opportunities in their life. So they tend to have diverse networks of people. They're constantly exposing themselves to new things or new environments. And because of that, they spot new opportunities. So I think it is that idea of, what is it that you can do to sort of make sure that you're keeping yourself open for opportunities. So of course the Creative Academy is one of them. And then actually following up, like when you see something, being like, and it doesn't mean you have to do every single one, but, oh, Reese Witherspoon is putting out a call for essays. Like, I'm going to stick one in. Oh, CBC has a contest for this. I'm going to give that a try. Harlequin's doing a thing. I'm going to do it. I mean, I think Marie is a great example of that, where I can see someone else going after that and being like, well, there's no point, because you can tell they're probably really looking more for film. I'm going to put my Eeyore voice on. They're looking more for film, and I'm not doing a film, so it's never going to happen. So there's no point in even putting it in. But you don't know, because you can also imagine that maybe they are looking for film, but one of the people on the committee is somebody who is an editor at Harlequin, who's going to say, oh my gosh, that's exactly the kind of story I've been looking for my line over here. So you don't win the contest, but you have an editor call you and say that they are looking for that. So you just don't know. One of the things that I have become aware of and valuing more and more is creating a network of people. So, for myself, like this past year has been not my favorite year. I could describe it as an unlucky year in many ways. But one of the things that I am most grateful for in it is realizing what a broad network that I have and what a lot of connections that I have with different people. and how that opens up to opportunities. You know, so I'd sort of put out, not just to the universe, but to my network, where I was like, you know, I'm looking for some other kind of opportunities with teaching and so forth. And in the past month, I'm going to do a summer intensive with SFU. The Whistler's Writers Festival reached out to me. The Lethbridge Word on the Street reached out to me. The Canadian Authors Association reached out to me. So some of that has been me actively pursuing and submitting things, but also some of it has been my network then telling people, oh, you need someone for that? You know what? Eileen mentioned the other day that she was looking for that. She's a great speaker. You should give her a call. So don't underestimate your network and putting out to people anything, because you never know what connections people might make and where those things might kind of stumble across each other. So I think it's really worthwhile. Oh, and I love Vanessa's quote, if people don't see it, is love is one of the areas where prophecies tend to be self-fulfilling. If you approach relationships expecting them not to last, they probably won't, and vice versa. I think that's an interesting and probably very, very true. I'm going on that. So the second principle of luck, so one is acting for opportunities, is the second is using intuition. So lucky people tend to talk a lot about using their intuition and gut feelings. I'm maybe a little bit less convinced about this one, but I do think there is an element of trusting who you are. Like, I think that's probably what this is coming back to, which is having a sense that you instinctively sometimes know what is right for you. And I don't know if you've ever done that, but maybe you've said yes to a date to someone where you kind of knew it wasn't going to be, but you're like, well, all right, now I'll give it a try. Or a job or something else where you felt like, oh, I need to give this something. But sometimes just think about, what is it that I know? And then making sure you're surrounding yourself with positive people and people that are giving you kind of that kind of thing. So you're building on your gut. There certainly is a lot of stuff in terms of safety. And again, I write about murder, but I don't know if anyone has ever read the book, The Gift of Fear. If you haven't and you're at all interested in writing thrillers, or you just want to think about personal safety, the book is all about the fact that all too often we don't listen to our intuition. So, you know, this guy has talked to a lot of people where it's like, I kind of knew I shouldn't get in the car with this guy, or I had a funny feeling when I saw this person, but I didn't want to be rude. Women are particularly gifted at that. But listen, like, that fear is a highly tuned instrument, and sometimes listening to your gut and knowing, like, I have a bad feeling about this, following that and thinking about that. Or conversely, a good feeling, like, sure, I've only known this guy a month, but I'll marry him, says Vanessa. Crazy woman, what are you doing? But apparently it worked out, so you can't go all wrong there, right? So listening to that gut, because I think too often we don't have enough faith in ourselves, but we do have a good sense of that. Up to and including, recently I had a friend, and we were talking about her husband has just unfortunately recently passed away. And we talked about, really, for the past couple of years, he's been sick. And he would go to the doctor and they were like, yeah, no, like, you know, your iron's a little low and this, but, you know, there's nothing wrong. And so he would kind of be like, well, okay, they're the doctors. But he had a sense something was not right. But he just kept sort of going like, well, if they say it's okay, and walking away from it. And not in, like, doctors would often say, like, well, we could do this test, but I don't really think, you know, there's any reason to go through it. And he would sort of walk away from it. And then, of course, unfortunately, as it turned out, he did have a form of cancer. And in fact, he succumbed to that cancer. And, you know, we had a real long talk about, he knew at some instinctive level, he knew something, like, the way I am feeling is not right. And I've heard that story over and over again with people who, you know, someone will poo-poo it and say, oh, it's just PMS or it's just this. And it's like, to trust in yourself and be like, no, something is wrong. This is not right for me. I know my body, something is wrong. And then being assertive with that. So whether that's a book contract or something with your stomach, I think there's something about saying, hang on, I've got a funny feeling, good or bad. Trust those instincts. The third principle of luck is optimism. And that is, lucky people expect good luck to keep going. They're like, I'm just going to keep riding this thing as long as it goes. So I think because of that optimism, they take more risks and they get themselves back up. So if they fall, they're like, oh yeah, well, that's okay. Like, but I know I'm eventually going to be lucky, so I'm going to just keep going. And I have long believed that the secret of publishing, and Vanessa, feel free to chime in here if you want to, is persistence. That the people that I know who have stayed in this industry are the people who just keep going. I did talk, and I had an interview somewhere in the academy with Robin Harding, who's a thriller writer. And she's a wonderful person to talk about because she was, her very first book sold for a large advance, a big 6-figure kind of advance. So she was like, I'm off to the races. This is great. But she also describes, like, she felt like, well, of course, like, I'm a good writer. Of course I'd sell my book for a big figure, right? And then that book came out, and it was the end of Chick Lit. And that book, although it did well, did not do as well as the publisher had hoped, given that thing. And so they dropped her right after the first book. And she did go on to sell a couple more books, but she was selling them for, again, very modest advances to smaller publishers. And I think in the wake of that, a lot of people would have been like, well, I had a good run, but then it didn't work out. So I tried, and that was it. But Robin was like, no, this is like, there's some hiccup going on. And she, you know, kind of came back and she did certain things. And then she came out and sort of reinvented herself writing thrillers. Before that, she had been doing romantic comedies. And she reinvented herself writing thrillers. And she's been now on bestseller lists, and she's been a Target Book of the Month. And she's, again, very successful, both financially and in terms of readership. And for me, the moral of that story is she didn't stop. On the opposite side of that, I started with very modest advances, very, very modest. And I, you know, kind of kept waiting and waiting. And then with Malice, for me, was my breakout book, where I took a big jump in terms of what I was getting in advances. And I remember my agent saying, be prepared to be the 15-year overnight success, which was true, where people were all like, wow, you came out of nowhere. And I've been like, I haven't been out of nowhere. Like, I've written 11 books before this. I've published 11 books. I've written more than that. But it was the idea, like, I just kept thinking, I'm going to get there. I'm going to get there. So the ability to stay in. And so persistence is the nice word. Stubborn is the word that people might be like, hey, but it is the idea, like, that you do believe things will work out. So optimism is a huge part of that. And the last principle of that is learning from the bad stuff. So people who are lucky tend to see, like, if something does go wrong, that it's an opportunity for them to learn something from that and reduce their chances of having failure or bad luck in the future. So again, it becomes that idea of, like, oh, this thing happened. Well, that's unfortunate. Like, what am I going to take away from that? And then they're on and, you know, picking themselves back up. Just like, oh, that was a great learning experience. I really took this away from that. What I want to say is, for anyone who's feeling the Eeyore discouraged, like, but that's not me. These are learned behaviors. That is, you can almost, to some degree, fake it until you make it. I may have told the story before, but I was painfully shy in high school. Like, I'm pretty sure most people actually didn't know that I went to that high school because I hardly ever talked to people, and I was really gawky and shy, and I second-guessed myself all the time. And I went from a very small town where everyone had known me since I moved there in grade 4 all the way through high school. So if you threw up in grade 6 in gym class, hypothetically, not that I would know anything about that, but if you did, everybody that I graduated with remembered that story. So when I was going off to university, I was going off to Michigan State, which is 42,000 undergraduates and another 20,000 graduate and PhD students. So it's a huge university. To give you some frame of reference, my hometown was 28,000 people. So for me, this was a huge shift. And I was very excited because people wouldn't know me there. And I remember that I came up with the idea, and probably 17 magazine gave me the idea. That was my Bible at the time. Like that I was going to go off to university and pretend that I had been popular and outgoing in high school. So I would constantly be like, well, if I was popular and outgoing in high school, then I would try out for a play, because it wouldn't occur to me that I wouldn't. So I did. And I, ran for student government and actually got on. Like, what idiot was voting for me? Who knows, right? And it wasn't that I lied. Like, it wasn't like I was telling people like, oh yes, I was the captain of my cheerleading team, because I have no coordination, and they would have been on to me right away. But in terms of everything else, I just started to make choices. Like, if I was this way, I would go to a party. I would do these things because I would go up and talk to those people who, have a poster in their room that is something that I really like. And I would meet people. And I found that it worked really well. And I find that I still do that to some degree. Like, I still am an introvert. I prefer quieter things. So when I'm at something like the Surrey Writers Conference, or if I have to do public speaking, I have a moment where I'm anxious about it, because it's like I spend most of my time just hanging out talking to my dogs, right? So, but I just sort of be like, well, for the next few days, I'm going to be the kind of person who is an extrovert. And I'm going to remember like, oh, right, I do have interesting stuff to say, and I'm going to get up and talk. And it really is faking it. A few people that I recognize came to my book launch party on Friday, and someone said to me, are you nervous or scared? And the truth of the matter is, yeah, I hate that stuff. Like, before I leave, I'm always like, oh, I don't want to go. Why did I agree to do this? I'm all upset about it. But then, like, once I get there, I just tell myself like, oh, right, like, I know how to do this. I'm going to be good at this. I'm just going to relax and be myself. And I can get through it. And then I can go and have a drink with my friends. So it's lovely and successful. So I do think there is a real element of practicing that. Telling yourself stories, like imagining, like, before you go to bed, what it's going to be like when you see your book on the shelf for the first time, or when the first time that a reader talks to you, and just letting yourself imagine that and visualize that in the same way that athletes picture themselves getting a gold medal over and over and over again. Your brain will take some muscle memory with that. So I don't want to spend as much time, but I do want to talk about the idea that there is something to the fact that there is just an element of luck in this business. And I understand that. And I don't want to be kind of trying to downplay that too much. So just also saying that it does happen. There is an element of luck. So some things that you can be thinking about is, do pay attention to things that are in the market. Do be doing your homework. Like, there are things you can do to sort of know that it is about, to some degree, getting your manuscript on the right desk at the right time with the right person. If you're going traditional publishing, if you're going indie publishing, you may have the luck of, you've written a book just as a certain area explodes in popularity, and all of a sudden you're writing that all the way. You will see people that you will look at their books and you will be like, how did that happen? Like, and they may have gotten lucky. But keeping in mind that luck is a lot of hanging in there. So there's a lot to be said for being kind of emotionally resilient and knowing that you're gonna be okay, and believing in that. Questions or thoughts about that? Deep thoughts, shallow thoughts? I'm open to all of them.
I have shallow thoughts, you know me.
Please, share some.
I think it's an interesting time we live in as well. And as somebody who is now, pretty confident, pretty, chill with who they are as a person, yet still unpublished, right? And so it can be challenging in our world of social media when you're looking at all the messages that everybody has. And I think it depends on mood, on how you take that information in. And even with the Creative Academy, I mean, it's a wonderful institution and I love it. But I must admit, sometimes when I go and look on Glip and see what everybody else is accomplishing, it's like, shit, I'm not doing that. And I'm really smart, right? And so sometimes I have to remove myself from it and just go, okay, you know what? Just damn well right. Just
And I think it's two parts. So one part is, I think we are so hard on ourselves and we beat ourselves up so much about, like, I should have done that. That could have been me. I had that book idea before this New York Times bestseller came. Like, if I had just written that damn book, that could have been me. But also then shifting that and being like, that could be me. Like, they're not doing anything that I couldn't also do. And also recognizing that there are times where we can't do it. I was talking to Kirsten was it last night? Maybe, I can't remember, but we were talking and she was a little down on herself, and she was like, we're coming up to that renewal time, with all of our goals that we set 12 weeks ago. And, I haven't done any of them. And I shared at that time, which I love, which is a new thing someone else told me about that I am stealing from her, is she's like, everybody has a to-do list and we feel bad when we haven't checked things off, but make sure you're making a ta-da list, which are things that you have done that maybe you didn't put on your to-do list initially, but you have gotten them done, so that you're reminding yourself, like, yeah, I didn't finish that book project, or I didn't submit the short story, but you know what I did do was help my cousin move. And I, went over to a friend's house when it flooded and helped her, save boxes from the flood. And I did this and I did that. And maybe that wasn't what I set out to do, but ta-da, I did something. And kind of recognizing those wins so that we don't beat ourselves up. And then if we're consistently struggling to do something, then I think it's really useful to ask ourselves, what's going on with that? If I say that I want this thing and I'm not doing it, what's going on? And sometimes there's legit things, like I've had a health issue, I've had to sell my house, I've had, like, whatever those things are. Okay, well, now that that's resolving, I'm going to get back to it. But if you look back and you're like, yeah, I've been watching a lot of Netflix and not even really good shows. Like, I somehow started watching something I didn't even care about. Asking yourself, like, okay, what's going on with that? Like, is there a fear of success? Is there a fear of rejection? If I finish this and I send it out, then I have to deal with that. I think that comes up a lot of times. I think sometimes it's, trying to figure out what's going on. And maybe you just need a break, and that's okay too. It does kind of depend, like, where is this thing? But then redefining it and saying, you know what, for the next 3 months, I just want to enjoy writing again. So I'm only going to write when, on the morning sprints, and I'm going to just enjoy it. And I'm not worrying about publication or finishing a book I'm just going to enjoy writing for a while. That's fine. I think we always set up that we have to achieve a success. But I think there's something to be said for loving your life. And maybe it's like, you know what, like, I've been so out of balance. And I've told people, like, right now, my goal is, because the past year has been such a challenge, is between now and June, is I just want to get on an even keel. I want to be sleeping regular. I want to be making times to see friends. I want to keep up with things that I absolutely must be done. But I am not worried about the fact that I'm not currently working on a book. I was so focused on, I'm not writing. I should be writing. I got to be writing. It's going to be a year before my next book comes out, and that's going to be too late. And and it's like, you know what? Right now, what I need to do is take care of myself. And if that means I bake some bread and I, take some time to see friends, I'm going to go back and visit my parents in April. I'm Maria condoing the shit out of my life as I'm preparing to move. So I'm packing things up, and I'm just going to try and enjoy this transition period and have faith that, you know what, come June, when all this stuff is over and I've moved into my new place and all that, like, then it'll be time to start writing again. And until then, these are the things I must do because I get paid to do them. So I need to show up to teach my classes and so forth. But the other things that maybe I feel like I should be doing, I should be, I should agree to judge that contest. I should agree to do that. I should be working on this book. I should be writing some. You know what? At the end of the day, that's not how I'm going to judge my life. and I'm going to stop beating myself up when the truth of the matter is I actually need this break right now. I need to get my feet under me. And that's okay. I can't remember who was talking about it, and it's possible it was in here, it's possible it was someplace else, but someone else was talking about the cycle of writing. And we give ourselves only credit for the writing and editing portion of things. But there is something to a fallow period, just like farmers have, where they leave the field empty for a period of time and let it kind of re-soak up with nutrients and so forth. That sometimes not writing, you're letting ideas percolate in the back. You don't know where they're going to go, what's going to happen with them. You're recharging your creative batteries. And I have gotten, because I am, and I totally get that I'm extremely fortunate to have published, but I have sometimes gotten on the thing where it's like, I have to have a book come out. I have to have a book. I have to write a book. And then it's no longer about the book. It's about production. And when it's about production, I am not sure that that is where our best work comes from. And in this day and age where, especially with indie publishing, where it's like, oh, you should have 4 titles out in a year, and you should have a novella in between each of those titles, and you should be doing this and that. Like, to some degree, if you like it and it gives you enthusiasm and you enjoy doing it, do it. And I think there's something to be said for having a good work ethic, of course. But it's also, I think, something to be said, sometimes you just need a little space and time, and that's okay too. So everyone is now going to go out and be lucky. All right.
I gotta run.
Go do your work.
Thank you.
You betcha.
Eric Maisel has a wonderful book called The Van Gogh Blues. It's all about, anybody else read it?
No.
It's about depression and creativity and how depression is actually meaningful. And after reading it, I thought, yeah, okay. I mean, I sort of get it, but it's a wonderful book.
Well, you will laugh, Vanessa. You'll appreciate this. I called my agent when my marriage fell apart. Don't ask me why, but I knew I was going to be missing some deadlines or things. And so I called her, and I ended up, I was crying on the phone, and she said, oh, honey, it's going to be okay. And she's like, at some point, you're going to feel like writing again. And when you do, we're going to monetize the shit out of your pain. It made me laugh even in the moment when I felt horrible, right? And strangely enough is I do kind of keep that in the back of my mind, this idea that the fact that I've been through this experience, and I would not willingly choose to have a marriage of 25 years break up, and I would not willingly choose the way that it has happened by any stretch of the imagination. When I am done and through this, I am recognizing I will be a stronger person, and I will also have some things to write about that I didn't before. And, if I should happen to kill off someone named Fiona, who just accidentally happens to be the name of my husband's mistress, that's just coincidence. That's nothing but coincidence there.
You should put that age at what she said to you, a quote, put it up somewhere.
Yeah. Someday I'm going to monetize the shit out of that. All right. So I am going to stop recording. I'm going to send all of you on your way except for Peggy, who's going to meet with me after this.